I've talked about Marvel comics, DC comics, and certain other Star Wars comics. Let's talk about Ultimate Marvel comics or Ultimate Comics. So to those who don't know what this is, hold on, let me just get this camera adjusted. Okay. To those who don't know what it is because the imprint's been dead for some time, is that Ultimate Marvel, later Ultimate Comics, was basically the prelude to the MCU. Like, there was a lot of elements of the MCU that took from Ultimate Marvel Comics, to go ahead and basically translate a lot of the heroes and whatnot and all the villains and put the best stuff of Marvel's universe of 616 and establish a new continuity instead of the modern day, give a modern perspective and everything. And all of it sounds like a very interesting concept. Like, we got Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. Shocking. And yeah, like I said, a lot of the MCU's elements are directly tied with the Ultimate Universe, which does say something about what the Ultimate Universe was intentionally developed for. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Marvel was at first thinking like, okay, if we're ever going to do a cinematic universe, maybe we should try how that would work in a new comic lineup. Like, the idea of the Ultimate Universe was, okay, I'm not 100% certain on this, but like, yeah, hold on, let me take a look. This is just my guess. That originally Ultimate Marvel Universe was supposed to be was supposed to originally be like, have a reboot of the old MC. Like, at the time, Marvel was filing for bankruptcy, and DC Comics was kicking their ass left and right. And basically, it was seemingly hinting that it was going to be the end of the 616 universe and move forward to the Ultimate lineup. And considering how the Ultimate lineup ended, it would not have worked out. It probably would have been the end of Marvel as we know it, because one, you're destroying an old continuity fans are passionate about. Two, the management of the Ultimate Universe was horribly mismanaged. So yeah, it would have failed. Marvel probably would have went bankrupt afterwards. We might have not gotten some of the better stories in the Ultimate lineup, such as Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate run he had for 12 issues, I believe. We wouldn't have gotten some good stories out of Ultimate Universe if it was the direct continuity. So instead, what they did was establish an different universe away from the 616 universe and establish it as a new universe with a new perspective and try some new different ideas. Hint, hint, Disney, Star Wars, and DC Comics. Like, that's what DC Comics was. They tried to compete with the Ultimate lineup by making the All-Star stuff. That failed. Then they tried again with the DC reboot of New 52. That wasn't working out well. And then they tried again with Earth 1, which seems to actually be working out this time. I haven't checked the stories, but I have heard the response. And then there's Star Wars that rebooted its whole continuity and basically got rid of all the legend stuff that people grew up with and won't bring it back as much as everyone wants. A lot of people do want it back, but that's a completely different subject. But I'm here to talk about the saga of Jonathan Hickman. Basically, Jonathan Hickman had worked on some Marvel stories. As you already know, he worked on New Avengers, Fantastic Four, FF, aka Future Foundation, and he even did some Ultimate imprints, such as the creation of The Maker, which, if I talk about the Ultimate lineup of the Ultimates during Jonathan Hickman's run, I'll get to that. But like, The Maker was an interesting guy they could have done with. Reminds me of another character in DC Comics they did, but unlike the Marvel side of things, they did it better. And as DC, they had a potential route they could have went with this certain character, and they wrecked it and made him into a straw man. But we're not talking about those characters. We're talking about Thor, or should we refer him as Ultimate Thor? Now, from what I've been gathering from the videos I watched from Comics Explain, Linkara's videos about the Ultimates, well, the Ultimates that he has talked about, like Ultimates 3 and Ultimatum, and even some of Comic Historians' videos about the Ultimate lineup, is that Ultimate Thor was basically made his debut in the Ultimates books by Mark Millar, and it was kind of left into interpretation mode about, is this Ultimate, is this really Thor the Thunder God, or is it just a crazy person that just happens to look like him? Like, that was always the big debate about who Thor was, and Ultimate Thor clears it all up. Like, no, this is 100% Thor. This is the Thunder God that we know from Asgard, and it's told a different way. Like, a lot of the stuff in the alternate universe is not epic in scope, like in terms of going into space. Like, there's no Guardians of the Galaxies. It's more like condensed to Earth and everything that goes on there. So Ultimate Thor is basically a prequel to a lot of stuff to explain who Thor was, and basically I'm going to cover the 4 issues of this miniseries. We open up with Ultimate Thor with runes of Asgardian language saying, "Do you lack faith, brother, or do you believe?" As such, we then see these runes that are explaining their symbols and signs, enlightening, the black sun, basically betrayal, death, and the end times, Ragnarok, and then we see Thor overlooking the end of civilization of his time, and we also see frost giants and Nazis. Interesting interpretation of Ragnarok. But yeah, weeks go into the modern times, and basically there's this whole super soldier race going on, basically, of how there's basically all this various countries are trying to develop their own super soldier serum and trying to compete with the Americans and ultimately try and basically conquer the world as we know it in terms of the arms race. Like, whereas the arms race was the Soviet Union and Russia, and not Russia, and America over nukes, this was a superhuman arms race, and a world filled with mutants that also didn't help matters. So basically, we open up with this scientist doing about how they're talking about the Super Soldier Initiative and how there's been some setbacks recently, and they get a doctor talking about a patient of theirs that is having a very complex issue. Like, he seems to be going insane in the membrane, but it turns out that's not really the case, as we will later find out, and as I've already explained in the video. But what they bring in is a doctor from outside the government named Dr. Donald Blake, which is actually a gigantic coincidence and an Easter egg. You see, Donald Blake was Thor's alter ego in the 616 universe. Yes, this is going to get complicated a little bit. Yeah, Donald Blake was Thor's alter ego in the 616 universe. In this continuity, he's revealed at the end of this as someone entirely different. But, like, yeah, it was nice to see that they love to give Easter eggs out there and try to inject some of the old familiarity and add some nostalgia factor and try to spin it around and do something different with it. But yeah, they go ahead to explain how the patient has been writing a lot, and then basically they think he's kind of losing his mind, and Donald Blake wants to speak to him, and then he talks to him, where this guy is basically saying, "And you must be the man they have sent to help me. You're a doctor of psychiatry, I presume," and how he's not actually crazy, how he says he's Thor, the god of thunder, and considering this is a universe where it's more realistic and not as blown out of proportion as the main Marvel universe or any other Marvel universe in the multiverse, yeah, that can be understandable. Like, that's why I did my complaint on Heroes in Crisis, where Troya does this interview at the Sanctuary where she talks about how certain people don't believe what happened in Troy actually happened, and that it was maybe a myth by a guy maybe named Homer. And it's like, you're going to tell me in the DC universe, the main DC universe, everyone goes ahead and doesn't believe that the Greek gods may have had a war in Troy? That doesn't seem possible to you, yet you have aliens, you have gods, you have celestials fighting. You've had 3 gigantic crises in the span of... In fact, I don't even know the time frame of each crisis, but still. At least the Ultimate Marvel line makes sense if someone ran around and said, I am the god of thunder reborn. People will be like, you're insane. Because there's no such thing as a god to them. Like, whenever you get that, it's like, either they'll think you're crazy, or they'll think you're some mutant with lightning, with thunderstorm abilities, thinking that your name is Thor, that you codenamed yourself as Thor. So, at least Ultimate Marvel beat DC on something for once. Yeah, I know, I probably gonna piss everyone off, but still, like, oh man. So, anyways, Donald Blake tells Thor about the future and eventual Thor that how basically there's this giant writing he's making about Asgardian stuff, saying it's all Thor can remember because because his mind is starting to catch up to what happened all those years ago, and basically how Dr. Donald Blake knows Asgardian stuff, and because probably he is. But yeah, we travel backwards in time. It takes place in 3 separate timelines: the modern times, the modern day present, the Nazi era, and Asgard era, when Asgard was first around. And we cut to Hitler. 100,000 men. And I'm not. And as much as I'm tempted to make a mocking language of Hitler speaking, I'm not sure I can pull off a German accent despite being me part German. Because I was born in America. I don't care about that. Speak your mind, Zemo. I don't have time to play games. And Zemo presents the sacred runes of Asgardian stuff, the legends, the stuff of legends, Fiora, and whatnot. And Hitler just basically gives the order, okay, you got your 100,000 men. And basically, Hamlet Zemo goes in and he says, Hail Hitler and whatnot. We then go to eons ago with Asgard, about how Thor, Loki, and Balder are basically fighting these frost giants in a war of attrition, and how Loki is a pessimist, and how he keeps thinking that, oh, it's inevitable, Ragnarok's coming, and whatnot. And Balder believes that that's not going to happen, and that Thor doesn't believe it either. And how how their father, the Sons of Odin, as they're called, even though Balder's really the true son of Thor in this continuity. Father Odin's building something, which turns out to be the hammer. And in this continuity, whereas I don't know the origin story surrounding the hammer of Thor in the main Marvel universe, I think it was very complicated, but still, since this is comics, in this continuity they keep it short and simple. It's part of Odin's power. Like, part of Odin's power lies within the hammer of Thor. There, done. So anyways, Zemo is going ahead and activating these runes where he's basically contacted the Frost Giants. And basically what they're vowing to do is basically destroy Asgard. They're preparing for a big crusade. The one thing that does bug me a little bit is, why are the Frost Giants wearing clothes? Like, we didn't see them in the Eons Ago segment of this comic. That just bugged me to no end. Like, is this to identify which ones are Nazi allegiance? If so, that doesn't make sense, because you would think that if they have the sacred runes and they're teleporting themselves somewhere, I think they would have put something on them to transport them, to teleport them there, or to, like, anything other than wearing clothes. And I'm curious as to know how they would wear clothes. And I'm curious as to know where the hell they got these clothes, and how they fit, and how do they make super, 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 extra, extra, extra large size. Like, I'm just left confused. I am generally left confused. So, yeah, this story continues where we cut to issue 2, and basically, yeah, things are showing signs of the destruction of Asgard as we know it. Yeah, things are kind of not looking good on the end of Asgard since Hitler's forces are now getting around. But, yeah, basically we get back to the present where, yeah, they still think he's crazy. and how they did some brain scans on Thor's head and realized that he isn't crazy. He's not suffering from a psychological condition. He's actually remembering because of complicated science babble talk of the brain. So yeah, and then we come back to eons ago with Thor and Odin and how the war is over with victory, and they're doing a big celebration, and all these people are half naked and they're about to start a big fight in order to celebrate this tradition. And basically, Thor and Loki fight, and ultimately the victory goes to Balder. And then we learn about the origin of the hammer of Thor. But then we cut out of that, and we cut to 1939 with the hit with Nazis and whatnot. And basically, the Frost Giants are like, "You have brought men. You have brought tiny men." And yeah, they don't like being in the Midgard realm, and they call this an army, and how they cheat metal and little men, and like, yeah. And basically what they offered was the runes in order to get this whole thing better, to get this whole thing working. And yeah, they basically are being rewarded for this, I think. And the Norn Stones, as they're called, and Thor and Odin talk and about the hammer and how the hammer is very powerful. And Thor asks how this happened. And it turns out that this is from Odin's power because he is Asgard. Because if he dies, all of Asgard's going to fall. So thanks for giving that away. And Thor feels like he's unworthy and should go to Loki or Balder. So in this continuity, whereas Thor in both the MCU and in the original story universe, that Thor was this arrogant, pompous, you know what? In this continuity, he seems like he feels like he doesn't deserve this powerful hammer, that it should go to someone else. And he seems more humble about some things, but he still has a little bit of arrogance to him, but he's more like doing it for banter. But yeah, Odin assures him that the reason why he gave him the hammer is because he has a big purpose ahead of him. We can cut to now and how Thor is continuing to say how things are gone and Mjolnir is gone. I finally managed to pronounce it, Mjolnir. And Dr. Donald Blake is like, "Nothing is lost forever, Thor. You simply need to find it again." And yeah, the scientists are like, "Okay, what do we do here? Like, either this is working or it's not. And this absurd situation, a god reborn as a man, that's impossible." And the other scientist just points out the freaking obvious of where this is all going to go if he does the wrong decision. Cut him loose and explain to the higher ups how they spent over $1 billion on a technologically specifically attuned to a man who, after thorough screening and testing, turned out to be insane. Or two, we go and give him a chance because he just he isn't crazy. We cut back to eons ago where Loki is talking with the Frost Giants and how Loki's talking to his mother and how he wants to be a good son and yada yada yada, and she says, "Bring me the Norn Stones." Basically setting off the stages of Ragnarok. And then there was something that really just annoys me. Loki then says, "And so, let chaos reign." Because even though this is to take place, this is like in the modern era of Marvel Comics, in the real world here, they call him the Lord of Chaos, even though he's the God of Mischief. They did that at first when the comic stuff, when Loki was around, but that was at least explainable because people didn't know a lot about Norse mythology, and how basically they wanted to give him a threatening title and calling him the God of Mischief wouldn't work. But like, this comic was published in the 2010s. I'm pretty certain they know who Loki, the God of Mischief, is. So, yeah. And plus, they retconned the history, I believe, of Loki in the 616 universe and gave him back his proper title. So, yeah, I don't get that. I just don't get it. We then go back to 1939. Yeah, jumping time points. We're basically going with the Christopher Nolan approach. And Hamlet Zemo opens the gates to Asgard, and the Frost Giants and Nazis move forward. And Hamlet Zemo says that that he has one last order for one of his followers, saying, "Be vigilant, Hamlet. Be loyal," and basically to wait when the time is right. And basically, they find out that the person who blocks their path when they get to Asgard is that it's the mighty Heimdall. Except it's not the Heimdall that you're familiar with in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's a completely different guy. And basically, he's kicking the Frost Giants' ass, and then Zemo goes ahead and says, "Bring me my weapon." He unleashes a bow and arrow and shoots Heimdall through the head, and he removes his mask, saying this: "Now the way to Asgard is open, and Loki, son of Odin, Lord of Chaos, has returned. Even though I'm not really the god of chaos, I am the god of mischief, but we can't use this logic because..." Wait, why? We don't have an excuse this time like we did back then. Yeah, so there's that stuff I keep questioning. But moving on. We're getting into issue 3. Asgard is now suffering Ragnarok. And basically, they do this disturbing, disgusting scene where the Frost Giants are basically siphoning the blood of Heimdall and making the Nazi soldiers drink it, because it will bathe them with power and strengthen them. And yeah, so that's kind of disgusting. And like all of them are bathed with blood in their mouths, and it's like, yeah. And if you look at issue 3, there's this image of when when the Frost Giant's drinking it. It's almost like his eyes are closed, like it's the delicious thing he's ever tasted. It just like, so you're all cannibals? I'm like, granted, that wouldn't be surprising because didn't in Ultimatum the Blob eat Wasp? Yeah, I will never read that comic. So anyways, it was time for the beginning of Ragnarok! And thus, Bring the Walls Down occurs, and they start launching their attack on Asgard. And the people of Asgard prepare for war. But then we come back to eons ago, where we get into Odin's chamber, and he's looking at the root, and Loki's looking at the runes. He fires his arrows and basically kills Balder, and Loki was like, "Oh, Balder, I never, like, it looks like he's remorseful and whatnot," but then he becomes all cruel and whatnot, and deals the finishing blow to Balder and killing him after piercing him through the eye. But then we come back to 1939, where basically Balder is dead by this point. But now, like, Ragnarok's occurring, forces are fighting, Asgard and Odin's forces are fighting Loki's army of Frost Giants and Nazis. And the wall's been breached, and things are not looking pretty good for them. The Nazis and Frost Giants are killing everybody. And then we get back to now while that's all going on. Like, yeah. Yeah, Professor Braddark is basically feeling like maybe he's just going to scrap the entire program because one man's insane. And he has concerns about this, and how Thor's saying, "I'm not crazy. I know what you're going to say. I'm not crazy." And, like, he can't seem to get on board with the idea of that you're a god reborn as a man. And how can any rational person be expected to? And I was like, okay, a perfectly valid point, because this is not the DC or main Marvel universes. This is a more grounded approach of everything. So the idea that you're a god reborn as a man, that's impossible. There's no such thing as gods. So, yeah, this makes sense. Donna Troy saying that people still doubting the existence of what happened in Troy in ancient Greek in the Iliad, it's impossible to believe. And they'll make up a whole bunch of theories. Even though you have Wonder Woman, you have Themyscira, they will gladly say God, Zeus, they will gladly say that yes, what happened in Troy was a thing. So, I'm still bugged by that. So yeah, Thor is explaining how he's not crazy, and basically asks, and the doctor says, "Will?" And the professor says, the scientist says, "Will you do what is right?" And Thor basically answers yes. And we cut back to Asgard. Things are looking pretty bad. The Frost Giants and Nazis are killing everybody, and basically Thor is stabbed in the back by an arrow, revealed to be Loki, on top of a frost giant. And yeah, Loki and Odin fight, and then Odin ultimately defeats Loki by sealing him away into the room with no doors. And how Loki says he's not sorry for nothing, and sealed away, and saying there was a fate worse than death. Suddenly, Odin is attacked by one of the frost giants, and Odin prepares to fight. However, we get a massive blood explosion occurring where the frost giant has basically gnawed and mauled, had turned into a wolf, and has basically chewed on the flesh of Odin, much to Thor's dismay, and Thor smashes the frost giant's face in. And Thor has to realize that the world tree's burning and it's the end of Asgard as they know it. Odin dies in Thor's arms. And the Nazis and Frost Giants are continuing their attack to fight Thor now, and he yells out, "Father!" Releasing one final strike against those who have caused all this, and thus we get into a bright white light, ending issue 3. Asgard's been destroyed, Thor has been, quote, killed, and now nothing remains of the great civilization known as Asgard. Moving on for issue 4. So now that that's happened, we cut back permanently to the present. How Thor now remembers everything, the war, the end of all things, and then he says, Donald Blake goes ahead and says, "Finally, can you tell me who I am?" And the men they call Donald Blake, yes, they do. But what's my real name? Balder the Brave. Balder, my brother. Yep, Donald Blake is really the reborn Balder in human form. Thus, they have a great moment of rejoicing and celebration to this, and how basically Balder's explained how Odin will return, and how this is going to lead to the resurrection of Asgard, and things are coming, things are going to change, and remake the two worlds. And explains that then that the scientists are waiting for us, and as such, they go ahead and have and now Thor is basically doing well, and then they revealed the kick-ass armor that Ultimate Thor would wear, and how they said there's a bit of a problem, like, yeah, we integrated it's the portable power unit. It's massive, but still. We've integrated a 4-dimensional teleportation engine, as well as weather manipulation and environmental ionization. Lightning? That's what I said. Unfortunately, we've reached a complete design dead ends. While this is being explained, Thor is asking for a marker, while basically the idea of the doctors doesn't listen, and is basically explaining everything that's currently going on. The engineering team remains uncomfortable with attaching the charging unit to the harness or the belt, fire too close to the fuel and all that. And 2, its form is dictated by its function. There's no getting around the size and shape of the damn thing. So unless we come up with a breakthrough, we're stuck with, "Why are you smiling, Donald Blake?" "Doctor, I think there's a simple solution to your problem." "Yes? What's that?" Balder presents something that shows Thor has drawn his eventual kick-ass hammer/axe weapon, and he just proudly proclaims, "Make me a hammer." Then we move forward in time to 8 months later, where we get to the events of the Ultimate issue 1, about how Thor's doing all these great stuff, apparently, how he's helping with a water reclamation project and helping provide water and food for the populace of some deserted regions of the world, and how it's making a huge difference, and how they tried to go ahead and how they've apparently tried to, the Ultimates probably might be interested in recruiting him, leading to his leading to a meeting with Nick Fury. Then we cut to 1 month earlier where Thor comes in and is having dinner with Nick Fury with his giant fuck you hammer with the axe. I still love its design. If only I could have a model like that. Too bad they're sold out. But yeah, they're having dinner and whatnot, and how and how the offer about Nick Fury's thing, how he's not really interested, but yeah, how Nick Fury's like, if you ever need it, I'll need you. As such, we cut to the beginning of issue 1 of Ultimates Reimagined, where Nick Fury's kind of mad, say somebody hasn't been answering my telephone calls. Thor is just sitting by his car and just drinking a little bit, and then we cut to Germany 1 week later. Be vigilant, Himmlet. Be loyal. Tell me what you have learned. There are 24 sacred runes, 1 rune of each stone, so 24 stones. On the pillar, there should be 3 spaces, 1 for each rune. As such, this Himmlet is going ahead and assembling these stones, putting them in their proper order, activating the rune, the pillars, releasing Loki, the Lord of Chaos, the God of Mischief. Thus, Loki has been reborn. Well, he's not reborn as a human, he's actually still in his god form, so he's ultra powerful. And then we cut to Triskelion 2 weeks later about a situation that's going on. And then we cut back to Norway, how there's 2 days prior. Himmlet's dead. Thank you for your contributions and loyalty to all these years. I am a horrible person. Thor and Balder find out that Loki has returned and how he's basically still God while they're reborn as men. And he's moving things around. And basically we cut back to now where Nick Fury is talking about the situation at the beginning of Ultimates where Grey Hulk, Bruce Banner, is causing mayhem and destruction and cataclysm. And Thor ultimately is talking with Balder during all this about how this complicates things and everything hangs in the balance. And we cut back to more with Thor with the Ultimates fighting Hulk, and yeah, and Thor, and then Balder assures Thor that you've always been a good man. A good man wanted to do good things, but you also had always doubted you that you could be more. And Thor assures him that it's time for that to end. Meanwhile, then I need to hear it. It needs to finally be said. Do you lack faith, brother? Or do you believe? Thor then says, I am my father's son, and this world is under my protection now. Meanwhile, Captain America and his tank has been destroyed by the Hulk, and now Captain America is fighting the Hulk. The Hulk is currently bashing for Captain America in. He's going to beat the living crap out of him. We don't know how this is going to end for Captain America. And Nick Fury's solution is to launch a nuke into the city. I reckon this council has made a decision, but given that it was a stupid-ass decision, I've elected to ignore it. And thus, right before Nick Fury could do what the Security Council was doing in the Avengers movie, lightning strikes the city. As such, and then Balder and Thor are talking, and then Balder says this, understand, even beyond Loki, there will be those that stand against you, that ridicule and mock you, and there will be those who doubt you. Waves, brother, waves against the room of Odin, the rock of Odin. And if it's not just words, what will you do when others stand in the way of our Father's will? What will you do when they take action to stop you, when they do violence? What will you do when men make war? Then, brother, I will bring down the thunder. The comic ends with the runes translating the word believe. Jonathan Hickman's epic Avengers piece, epic ultimate comic version of Thor. If you heard the volume go down for a little bit a second, I accidentally clicked the volume input. But anyways, the mixer. So yeah, that was Ultimate Comics Ultimate Thor. It's actually a pretty good read. I actually enjoyed it for the most part. I was questioning some things, but that was really more just nitpicking. Some being the Lord of God of Chaos thing that still confuses me. Like it worked. It made at least some sense back when the Marvel was starting the Ultimate Avengers stuff and the Thor stuff. Now it doesn't make sense. So yeah. And I'll get around to talking about Jonathan Hickman's Ultimates run in a few days or so, hopefully, but that could change. So those were my thoughts on Ultimate Comics Ultimate Thor issues 1 through 4. This was Nia Reality Entertainment. If you like, comment, subscribe, and donate, do for more. And Vor Valhalla!